When we think about the concept of security in our daily lives, it usually boils down to something remarkably simple, like a binary mechanism, a lock on a front door.
Right, just a piece of metal.
Exactly. You turn the key, the bolt slides into the strike plate, and the outside world is officially kept on the outside. It's this fundamental physical barrier of civilized life. And it represents a massive psychological boundary between what is yours and what belongs to the rest of the world.
And we build, interlocking multi-trillion-dollar systems just to reinforce the concept that that single deadbolt represents.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we have property laws, judicial courts, local and federal police forces, insurance conglomerates. All of these massive structures exist to back up this basic assumption of personal property. We assume this is baseline human nature, right? That humans just naturally partition off resources and need external enforcement to prevent chaos.
But then, you step away from the concrete sidewalks and the streetlights. You plunge into the deep, ancient mountain jungles of the Malay Peninsula in the year 1908. You encounter the Sakai people. And suddenly the concept of a lock or a door or private property or a police force doesn't just vanish. It never existed in the first place.
Yeah, it's a completely different paradigm.
Welcome to you, our endlessly curious learner, to another custom-tailored deep dive. Today we're going to explore the hidden, completely self-sufficient world of the Mai Darat, which is a specific tribe of the Sakai.
And the source material for this is just incredible.
It really is. We are drawing from this extraordinary, unfiltered grounding source. It's a 1908 first-hand account titled My Friends the Savages, written by Captain G.B. Cerruti, an Italian settler who spent 16 years living intimately among them.
16 years in the deep jungle, that is no joke.
Not at all. We are going to examine how a society not only survives, but thrives in one of the most lethal environments on Earth. And they do it without a single concept of written law. We're talking intense spiritual rituals, peerless architectural ingenuity, and, my personal favorite part, a terrifying mastery of chemical plant poisons. Okay, let's unpack this.
To really understand the gravity of Cerruti's observations, you have to picture the severe contrast of the Malay Peninsula at the dawn of the 20th century. Down on the coasts in places like Malacca, you have the booming epicenter of global colonial trade.
Steamships choking the harbors.
Exactly. The rubber boom is in full swing. Tin mining is tearing up the earth. It is a world just vibrating with this frenetic pursuit of wealth. You have extreme social stratification, rigid hierarchies, indentured laborers. The whole society is driven entirely by capital accumulation.
And enforced by armed police. It's an environment where every single person is basically scrambling up a ladder, and the legal system exists just to protect whatever they manage to grab.
Right. But turn your back on the coast, and you face the interior. And the Malayan jungle is not a park. It is a pathless, vertical, suffocatingly dense rainforest. It is actively hostile to human habitation.
Highly hostile.
And deep within those mountains, completely insulated from that frantic 20th century economy, live the Sakai. They have no currency, they have no social classes, no masters, and absolutely zero desire to participate in the quote-unquote civilized frenzy happening just a few hundred miles away.
Which is wild, because to understand how they survive the jungle, we first have to understand this radically free, egalitarian way they structure their society.
Yeah, they present a working model of a decentralized egalitarian society. When Cerruti arrives, he's probably expecting to find, primitive chaos or maybe a brutal chiefdom, but instead he finds a society functioning without any coercive authority whatsoever.
None at all.
None. There is no chief who can issue orders. There is no hierarchy of violence. The closest thing they have to leadership is an elder, which is typically just the grandfather of a sprawling extended family group.
But even the term elder implies, like, a governing body, which isn't really accurate based on the text. His role is entirely advisory, right?
Exactly. He can't levy taxes, he can't conscript labor, and he certainly can't punish anyone. His influence rests entirely on accrued respect. So if a dispute arises between families, the elder acts as a mediator, offering a perspective based on experience.
But he has no mechanism to enforce his ruling. So wait, what happens if a family firmly rejects the elder's arbitration?
Well, the result is not a rebellion, and it is not a civil war. The dissenting family simply packs up their few transportable belongings and relocates to another part of the forest. The vastness of the jungle allows them to resolve conflict through distance rather than domination.
It's basically a completely decentralized network. But wait, Without laws or police, doesn't it devolve into chaos? I mean, it's just standard assumption is the strong take from the weak.
You would think so, but no. Cerruti documents virtually zero crime, no theft, no murder. And the reason for this absence of crime is deeply structural. You cannot steal a man's wealth if the concept of wealth hasn't even been invented.
Right. You don't murder a rival over an inheritance when there's literally no land to inherit and no capital to pass down.
Exactly. The motives that drive the vast majority of civilized crimes are inextricably linked to property and status. The Sakai just remove the motives, and in doing so, they remove the crime.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Like if a Sakai hunter has a successful day and brings down a wild boar, he doesn't salt the meat and hide it in some private cache for his own family. He brings it back to the settlement, the fires are stoked, and everyone eats until the meat is gone.
Yeah, if someone from a neighboring hut is hungry, they just walk over and join the meal. There is no accounting system keeping track of who owes who a caloric debt.
And this extends into their personal lives, too. Cerruti observes that they are strictly monogamous in practice, not out of fear of divine punishment, but out of profound pragmatism.
Right, bigamy isn't outlawed by some tribal decree, but it is incredibly rare. And if a marriage fractures, they do not engage in violent, jealous retribution. They just prefer a peaceful separation.
And just divorce amicably.
Yeah, the communal structure absorbs the care of the children, and the individuals move on. They have structured a society that inherently diffuses tension rather than escalating it.
Which brings up a fascinating psychological difference. Their relationship with time. Think about your own daily grind, right? Our society is entirely future-oriented. How much of your stress is tied to planning for a future that hasn't happened yet? We obsess over quarterly earnings, retirement accounts.
We endure immense present-day stress for a theoretical future security.
Exactly. But the Sakai completely eliminated that anxiety. They do not plan for the future. They live in a permanent present tense.
And this is reflected in their very linguistics. Cerruti notes that the Sakai only have specific words for numbers up to 3.
Wait, really? Only up to 3?
Yeah. If they need to quantify something larger, they might say 3 threes to mean 9, but anything beyond that abstract threshold is simply classified as many. Their language does not require precise long-term accounting because their lifestyle doesn't require it.
Our society views hoarding resources as the ultimate safety net. The Sakai view hoarding as a dangerous waste of energy. It's a complete inversion of baseline human anxiety.
What's fascinating here is how their perceived laziness is actually a highly logical adaptation to an environment that constantly provides. Why toil to store food in a hyperhumid, aggressive rainforest?
It would just rot anyway.
Precisely. The jungle is an endless year-round pantry. Why burn immense caloric energy to preserve food when the forest will predictably provide fresh sustenance tomorrow? They labor only for the calories required for that specific day. Once those are secured, work ceases. The rest of the day is spent resting, conversing, playing bamboo instruments.
But because they don't farm on a massive scale or build permanent stone cities, they have to manipulate the raw materials of the forest with, like, an engineer's precision to survive that extreme physical exposure. And the foundation of their entire material culture is bamboo.
Bamboo is a marvel of natural engineering. It possesses a higher tensile strength than many alloys of steel. It grays at astonishing rates, and it's naturally hollow. The Sakai utilize it for everything. The structural framing of their elevated huts, weaving floors, water storage, weaponry.
It's like the ultimate multi-tool, the Swiss Army knife of the jungle. But the most impressive application, to me at least, is using it to manipulate heat, using a wooden tube as a boiling pot.
Yeah, that requires some explanation because it directly contradicts our basic understanding of fire.
Right. If you put a piece of timber into a roaring fire, it turns to ash. Yet the Sakai cook their stews directly inside green bamboo over an open flame. How does the vessel not just incinerate?
It's an intuitive application of thermodynamics. When they harvest a thick section of green bamboo, the cellular walls of the plant are still saturated with water. But the crucial mechanism relies on the water they pour into the hollow cavity along with the meat and yams.
Okay, so the water inside is key.
Exactly. At sea level, water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The ignition point of dried wood, however, is generally above 400 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, I see. So the thermal energy from the fire transfers through the bamboo wall and goes directly into heating the water.
Precisely. As long as there is liquid water inside the bamboo, that water acts as a thermal sink. It absorbs the massive heat energy to undergo a phase change from liquid to steam. This continuous energy absorption prevents the internal temperature of the bamboo wall from ever exceeding the boiling point of the water.
That is brilliant. So the exterior of the bamboo will heavily char and turn black, but it can't structurally ignite until all the internal moisture is gone.
Right. The food inside is cooked in a highly pressurized, steam-rich environment, but it requires an exact understanding of the initial moisture content of the bamboo and the heat output of the fire.
And they apply that same mechanical intuition to creating the fire itself. They don't use flint and steel. They build a localized heat engine out of friction.
The friction fire method Cerruti details is a sophisticated manipulation of kinetic energy. They take a piece of dry bamboo and bore a small hole through the wall. Inside the cavity, they tightly pack a highly flammable dry pith extracted from a specific palm known locally as lulup.
So the lulup acts as the tinder. But how are they generating enough concentrated heat to ignite it without a spark?
Through immense rapid friction, they take a long, flexible strip of rattan cane, which is incredibly tough, and wrap it around the bamboo cylinder directly over the bored hole. The operator pins the bamboo firmly to the ground with their feet, grips the two ends of the rattan cane, and pulls it back and forth in a rapid sawing motion.
They're essentially turning their arms into pistons.
Exactly. The sheer friction of the rough rattan fibers tearing across the exterior of the bamboo generates highly localized, intense heat. This thermal energy transfers directly into the highly combustible lulup pith. Within seconds, it reaches the flash point and it begins to smolder.
It's an incredibly efficient closed-loop system using only ambient materials. But that ingenuity scales up significantly when they have to clear land.
Oh, the tree felling.
Yes, because a tropical rainforest isn't just dense brush. It has ancient hardwood trees that easily reach 150 feet tall. To bring one down, an industrial logger would use massive steel crosscut saws. The Sakakai use a tiny iron hatchet, barely 8 inches long.
Confronting a 150-foot tree with an 8-inch blade from the ground is an exercise in futility. The base of these tropical hardwoods often features massive, flaring buttress roots. Hacking at the base would take weeks.
So they alter the angle of attack. Instead of fighting the hardest part of the tree, they build their way up to its vulnerability. They construct elaborate bamboo scaffolding, climbing 10, sometimes 20 feet into the air.
They're aiming for the point where the flaring buttress roots taper off and the wood grain becomes slightly less compacted.
Imagine balancing on slender bamboo poles 20 feet in the air, swinging a tiny hatchet. They systematically chip away at the circumference until the immense weight of the upper canopy just pulls the behemoth down. Gravity does the work.
It is a triumph of leverage and geometry over brute force.
And once that land is cleared, or when they're hunting, they have to navigate a terrain that is famously disorienting. A dense jungle has no horizon line. You can't see the sun. Every square mile looks identical.
To an outsider, yes. But the Sakai navigate by leaving microsigns that are effectively invisible to the untrained eye.
We're not talking about blazing trees with an axe.
No, it's incredibly subtle. A specific species of leaf notched in a particular geometric pattern. A small twig snapped to point at an unnatural angle. It constitutes a physical, forest-wide communication network.
And when you are covering those miles, traversing extreme elevation changes and tropical humidity, the hydration demands are massive. But the Sakai don't carry heavy vessels of water. They read the botany of the forest to find hydration on demand.
They utilize the water vine. They possess the botanical knowledge to visually identify the specific species of thick, creeping vine that yields potable water, distinguishing them from vines with toxic sap.
But you can't just hack into the side of the mine.
Exactly. If you cut the middle, capillary action just pulls the water up or down the interior tubes and you get nothing. You have to sever the fluid column correctly at the lowest point. Gravity forces the pure, biologically filtered water to pour out in a steady stream.
They are literally tapping into the hydraulic architecture of the jungle. It's so cool.
Yeah.
But fueling that physical exertion requires massive caloric intake, and their diet is an adventure in itself.
It is entirely dictated by what the forest yields on any given day. Wild yams, sweet potatoes, wild chestnuts they call pli pra.
And the protein menu is aggressively utilitarian, wild boar, sure, but also roasted monkeys, giant forest rats, and large snakes. And they rarely gut or clean the animal. They take the entire unskinned snake and throw it directly onto the roasting fire.
It's a matter of caloric efficiency. Skinning and gutting expends energy and discards potential calories. The intense heat singes off the scales, and they extract maximum nutritional value with minimum preparatory labor.
But amidst this gritty survival diet, There's a massive biological event that completely upends their societal routine. The durian, the king of fruits, or as the Sakai call it, the sumpa.
The durian tree is an apex feature of the canopy. These trees grow over 150 feet tall, and the fruit is roughly the size and weight of a large bowling ball covered in thick, sharp spikes.
And the sensory experience is legendary. The smell is the first thing that hits you. Trudy describes it as being worse than a massive heap of rotting onions, like decay and raw sewage mixed with natural gas.
Yet the interior flesh is a staggering juxtaposition. It's a thick, pale yellow flesh with a texture like rich custard. And the flavor is extraordinarily complex, sweet, creamy, hints of almond and caramel. It's incredibly dense in fats and carbohydrates.
And the Sakai are utterly devoted to it. During the August and September ripening season, they literally abandon their villages. The whole tribe marches deep into the trackless forest to camp under these ancient durian groves for up to a month.
Just waiting for the massive spiked fruits to naturally detach and plummet to the earth.
Which puts them in an impact zone. A 5-pound spiked fruit falling from 100 feet is a fatal injury. But the caloric payoff is so immense they accept the risk. They gorge themselves, and then they preserve the excess in hollowed-out bamboo tubes to ferment. Think about that for a second. Would you abandon your home for a month just to camp out under your favorite restaurant? That's the level of dedication we're talking about here.
It illustrates how deeply their social rhythms are tethered to the biological cycles of the forest. They mold their entire civilization around the spontaneous offerings of their environment.
But surviving the physical mechanics of the jungle is only half of their reality. The physical predators, like tigers, are terrifying, but the predators they fear most are the ones they cannot see.
This brings us to the profound psychological weight of their belief system and the role of the Allah. You have to grasp their animistic worldview. They believe in a singular, pervasive, evil spirit that inhabits the violent phenomena of the natural world.
It lives in the howling winds, the storms, and it's the direct cause of all sickness.
Right. When a massive tropical storm hits, they don't just cower in their huts. They mount a physical counterattack.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When the storm hits its peak, the village erupts into organized chaos. The women rush out, cut locks of their own children's hair, and throw them into the fires to create an acrid smoke. They beat hollow bamboo sticks together to create this deafening wall of sound.
And the men take it into actual combat. They smear their faces with charcoal to look monstrous, grab their blowpipes, run out into the torrential rain, and literally shoot their poisoned darts straight up into the howling wind.
They are attempting to assassinate the storm spirits.
It's an externalization of terror. They reclaim agency in a situation where they are otherwise entirely powerless. And the individual responsible for mediating this invisible war is the Allah, the village sorcerer and primary physician.
And the process of becoming an Allah is, it's one of the most grueling psychological crucibles I've ever encountered. It's a traumatic initiation.
The position passes from father to son. But when the reigning Allah dies, his body is not buried. The tribe carries his corpse deep into the isolated jungle, props it upright against a tree, and leaves it exposed for 7 consecutive days.
7 days in equatorial heat. The decomposition would be horrific.
On the evening of the 7th day, the son must walk out into the deep forest, completely alone in the pitch black. He must locate the rotting corpse and sit directly in front of it for a solitary vigil. He burns massive amounts of a sweet-smelling resin over a small fire to mask the stench.
So he's physically exhausted, fasting, breathing in heavy, potentially psychoactive smoke, staring at his decaying father. He was psychologically primed for a massive break from reality.
Which is exactly what the ritual requires. They believe the soul of the deceased sorcerer enters the body of a jungle tiger. The son eventually perceives a massive tiger silently emerging from the foliage, lunging at him, roaring inches from his face.
The ultimate test of nerve.
If he flinches or attempts to flee, he fails. He will never become the Allah. But if he maintains absolute stoicism, the hallucinatory tiger vanishes. In its place, 2 luminous fairies materialize and telepathically impart the secret words of power and botanical knowledge. He survives the night and returns as the Allah.
That is just intense. And having endured that, he's now responsible for the health of the community. For minor ailments, he performs the teinek, sweeping the patient with broad jungle leaves to brush the invisible spirit into one spot.
Then he forms his hand into a tight cylinder, presses it against the patient's skin, and violently inhales. He's attempting to physically suction the spirit out of the body and into his own hand, which he then beats with the leaves to destroy it.
Sweeping leaves and suctioning air might relieve a tension headache. But what happens when a highly contagious lethal pathogen hits the camp? A fever doesn't care about sympathetic magic.
When a severe illness strikes, the situation elevates to a massive defensive protocol known as the chintok. And this is where their spiritual terror manifests as a highly effective epidemiological intervention.
As soon as a severe illness is diagnosed, the entire village goes into absolute lockdown. The borders are sealed.
They construct an aggressive perimeter of sharpened, poisoned bamboo stakes facing outward on every path. Traps and snares are rigged, no one is permitted to leave, and absolutely no outsider is permitted to enter.
Because they believe an outsider might inadvertently carry a new evil spirit that would join forces with the demon killing the patient.
Furthermore, they enforce total darkness at night. The healthy villagers paint their faces aggressively, form a circle around the sick individual, and begin a deafening auditory assault with their bamboo stamping tubes. Screaming and howling in the pitch black for hours, repeated every night for 7 days.
Their intent is to terrify the evil spirit into fleeing. But look at the macroscopic result. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this superstitious ritual is actually a highly effective, strictly enforced medical quarantine.
It is a stunning example of cultural evolution. They lack microscopes, they have no conception of germ theory. Yet, through trial and error over millennia, they have arrived at the exact correct behavioral response to stop the transmission of an infectious pathogen. They are preventing the spread of contagious disease without even knowing what it is.
That fear of invisible contamination completely dictates how they handle the two most vulnerable moments in human existence: birth and death.
Yes, both events are viewed as moments when the veil between the physical world and the spiritual void is torn open.
When a Sakai woman gives birth, she is entirely isolated in a special maternity hut, and the floor is elevated on stilts significantly higher than a standard home. Why? So her scent and the scent of the birth don't touch the raw earth and alert the evil spirit.
They theorize that the scent will catch the crosswinds high in the canopy and disperse harmlessly. And the father is strictly prohibited from entering the hut. He's banned from even seeing his child for months.
The mother's diet is also heavily regulated by sympathetic magic. She cannot eat monkey meat, fearing the baby will absorb the monkey's hyperactive, chaotic traits. She cannot eat snake meat, fearing the child will become slithery or mute.
If birth is managed through silent isolation, death triggers an entirely different protocol. The grief is explosive and loud. They wail and smear their faces with charcoal to hide their identities from the spirit that just claimed their loved one.
They bury the body or place it in a tree with its face to the west, and they leave provisions: water, yams, meat, and build a small fire, keeping it lit for 7 days. They are terrified the hungry spirit will try to drag them down with it.
But the truly defining characteristic happens after those 7 days. They gather around the deceased individual's hut and burn it completely to the ground. And then they abandon the entire village forever.
They pack up their blowpipes, their children, and their tame wild boars and march into the jungle to start over from scratch, because they believe the evil spirit has permanently claimed that territory. Imagine the psychological toll and the sheer physical labor of having to abandon your entire town and build a new one every time a single person passes away. How does a society sustain that?
It's the ultimate inversion of the sunk cost fallacy. But systemically, this religious mandate acts as a cultural mechanism that enforces their nomadic lifestyle. It physically guarantees they can never accumulate generational wealth or build permanent stone structures.
And to survive this constant nomadic movement, to defend against wild beasts and secure food, they rely on their most famous creation, their blowpipes and their lethal plant poisons.
The blowpipe, which they call the blow, is a beautifully incised bamboo tube 8 to 10 feet long. The interior bore is polished to absolute frictionless perfection so it doesn't disrupt the laminar flow of the air.
And the darts are tiny wooden needles carved from palm fronds. But to propel it, they attach a tiny cone made from ultra-lightweight palm pith to the base of the needle. It catches the air perfectly, capturing 100% of the kinetic energy from the hunter's breath.
It's utterly silent, highly accurate, up to 60 meters, and the dart tip is designed to snap off inside the target so the animal can't pull it out.
This raises an important question. How does a tiny scratch from a wooden needle bring down a massive canopy monkey or a human? It's not the physical trauma, it's the payload, the poison.
The baseline poison they use for everyday hunting is extracted from the ipok tree, also known as the upas tree. The sap contains highly potent cardiac glycosides that cause massive cardiac arrest.
They tap the tree during a full moon, collect the milky sap, and the ala boils it down into a dark, tar-like sludge over a fire while chanting. They mix in lemon juice and red arsenic. It's a total witch's brew.
It dries into a hard lacquer on the dart tip. But here's the bizarre chemical paradox. If you shoot a wild boar with an IPOC dart and it dies, the meat is entirely safe to consume.
Right, because the toxin is lethal in the bloodstream, but neutralized by the acidic mammalian digestive tract.
Yeah.
You just cut away the purple, poisoned flesh around the wound, discard it, and eat the rest.
But IPOC is just their standard ammunition. When they require absolute, guaranteed, instantaneous death, they escalate to the ultimate poison.
Legob.
Legop is prepared exclusively by this ultra-isolated tribe, the Mai Bretak. It is so lethal that the Sakai believe an evil spirit actively tries to possess it during brewing.
The recipe is heavily guarded. Women are banned from the area. The brewer must fast entirely from meat and fish. They use brand new clay pots. They pound the legup roots, filter the toxic water, and boil it down.
But then they add these bizarre ingredients, the juice of mysterious bulbs, crushed giant black wasps, and the powdered fangs of the deadly sendok cobra. Okay, wait. Do crushed wasps and snake fangs actually make a plant poison more deadly chemically?
From a strict biochemical perspective, almost certainly not. The immense fatal power is derived entirely from the alkaloids in the legup root itself. The wasps and snake fangs are chemically redundant. So why risk their lives to get them?
Because of sympathetic magic. They know a cobra fang delivers agonizing death. They believe that by crushing the physical fang and adding it to the brew, they are magically transferring the snake's inherent power to kill into the liquid. They know the wasp sting causes a burning fever, so they add the wasp to command the dart to inflict that specific fiery agony.
It's a fascinating glimpse into primitive scientific theory. And the physical effects are horrifying. A dart hits a monkey high in the canopy. Within moments, the poison overrides its nervous system. It convulses, loses its grip, and plummets to the ground, dead before it hits the earth.
The text even details a dark anecdote of a criminal from the coast who tried to assault a Sakai woman. A hunter saw it, didn't shout, didn't challenge him, just raised his blowpipe and exhaled. The man died almost instantly. There is no antidote.
And when every single adult male carries a silent, instantaneous death sentence in his hand, the mathematics of physical coercion completely collapse. You can't bully a neighbor when the weakest man can kill the strongest man with a single puff of air from 50 yards away. It enforces an absolute code of mutual respect.
It really does.
So what does this all mean? We've explored a people who live in perfect harmony with a lethal environment. They don't conquer the jungle, they borrow from it. They have no money, no locks on their doors, no jails, yet they live with a profound, peaceful honesty that the civilized cities on the coast completely lack.
It forces an uncomfortable reevaluation of our definitions of progress. Captain Cerruti, the European colonist who wrote our source, ultimately wonders who is truly more savage. Is it the naked Sakai who refuses to kill out of greed or ambition and shares every meal with his neighbor?
Or is it the civilized world? A world that builds massive, organized societies, but requires brutal prisons, heavy iron locks, armed police, and constant warfare just to keep its citizens from tearing each other apart for a few extra dollars.
Next time you lock your front door, ask yourself, what exactly did we trade away to become civilized?
That is a terrifying mirror held up to the architecture of our own lives. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep questioning the world around you.